Okay, so I said that in my reply, which is what I'm doing now, I'll actually go over the second part of the idea of once you write something to the file system, and again, I'm using just a standard string text file, then how do you read from that? And you'll see in my code how we do it. So let's switch over to VS Code. I'm going to run the debugger again. I'm going to set a breakpoint right here at leaderboard. And just to be clear, the only thing that happens before this is on the menu board, on the user menu. When the user selects one, it runs the leaderboard. And the leaderboard's first function is to read the file. So let's walk through that. So go ahead and come over here. Go ahead and launch the current file. It'll start the application. Oh, and that's a really important point. Sorry. The breakpoint actually should be here. Actually, that should have run anyway, but that's all right. Let's try it again. Current file. Not the name of the module. Current file. There we go. Yeah. I don't know why. I guess, yeah. So that's actually a really good. I thought I had it here. Maybe I didn't. So if you place it, the breakpoint, and that's good to know, here it's going to stop anything from happening because when Python first goes through your file, it actually will just set up the functions, but it doesn't run them. It just sets them up in memory. It does make sure that there's no syntax error on them, but it actually, if you stop that there, which I thought I had it, but it's okay. So just know that that's true. So in this case, because I wanted to show you, now if I hit leaderboard, it's going to stop on this line. And then what I will do is go ahead and step into this. So I have a function called read file, which kind of makes sense, right? So I'm setting up very much the same way I had done when I wrote to the file that directory name. Again, I'm going to drop out the file name because I don't need it, but I like the way this looked and I had used it when I was troubleshooting. But I called OS path absolute with the actual file name that we're running. And then I got the path off of that to split that so I could have that dir name, okay, directory name. And again, when you pass through this line, when you step into it, okay, then afterwards you can come back, roll over, look at which each of those things were. And in this case, all I wanted was the actual dir name, directory name, because that's where I stored the file that needs to be read. Because remember, once you write to a file, you have to then bring that file into memory for you to do something with it. So this is the idea of reading the file. I know there's many ways to do it, but this is the way I have. So I've set up, in this case, a local scoped games. Now, not to be confused with what I already had up here. This is a global one used when my user quits playing and it shows the current session statistic. This is different. This is just a locally scoped list. Okay, so then I set that up so that I can store as I read through the file. I say, okay, my path name is equal to my file name, and I concatenate to that the actual name, and again, when I stepped through that, then I saw that that actually determines the location of the file path. Okay, I was actually documenting and I stopped, so, but you can kind of see just based on my comments here. So now with that file path, okay, I'm going to first read the first line. Okay, FP is opened with this file opened, right, or this path opened as FP. So FP.readline, right? Then when I execute this first one, then it just reads the first entry on there. Okay, and then while there's a game, so it just reads the first one. It says, hey, while there's a game, then in this case, what I'm going to do is actually take the game, because notice what it is. It's actually got that end of line character. So I'm gonna strip that out and I'm gonna split it so that I have two strings in an array. Okay, You'll see what I mean, because so in this case I have a multi-dimensional array, and you'll see that in a minute what I'm reading into memory. Okay, so go down this line, split that, and then you can see what happens here is I have a list with 2 entries, the player name and the outcome. And then what I'm going to do is append this into here, right? So now I have the first one. Cool. And then when I'm done with that, when I append that, then I read the next one. So I just continue through. So I read the first line, and then while there's a game, because what this would do is if there's nothing in the file, then it can't do anything, obviously. And probably I need to output some content. Says there's nothing in there. That'd be good. Someone is going to keep going, right? Because there's not very many in there. And you can see as I go through here, when we're looking at games, what's getting added, because you can see that each time I'm appending that, you can see that that game's list is getting built up because it's iterating while there's a game, because again, at the end of this, I'm reading another game. Should be almost done here. Oh, okay, slow down. Okay, so that's it. So then I returned, right? So then I return that. And again, this is a local variable for this function that is called games. Doesn't mean this, because this returns, right? Returns whatever that array that gets created. Again, what we can see, and you'll see this as we execute this line, is that this is the array. And inside of it, and you can see this up here at the top, it's entries are another array that has the player name and the outcome, the result of the gameplay. Okay, that's how I did mine. So now what I decided, it took me a little while. This is the part that took me a little time to just kind of reason about and find some stuff. And this is where I use some new things, not that we've covered in this idea of a filter. So what I did is here is I said filter, which is a method for arrays. And lambda, I looked at a little bit when we did some of the data dictionary stuff, which is basically just an anonymous function. It says for every item in this array, which I've passed here, right? We're going to call that X. And what I want you to look at is X1. Now, what would X1 represent? Let's think about that, right? So if each item is X, X1 would be win or loss. And I said, if that's equal to win, right, then you're going to return that to here. So this one line is actually going to iterate over each of my items, in my array, which each item is an array itself. So it's a multi-dimensional array. Okay, so what will happen here is it'll take a few moments for it to build up this win. But what it will be is it's pulling out only the wins that are in there. So it takes a moment here. And again, this isn't as clear that this is iterating over it, but the way you can tell is I have to keep hitting, oh, now I'm done, right? So now what I can see is I have a new, in this case, and by the way, what gets returned, I believe it's a filter object. And so what I do is I call list on it. And what that does is gives me back a local variable called win that I can now do some more work to do my leaderboard. Okay, so now I'm going to set up a data dictionary, right, and a default one with ints, right? So that just sets that up. And now once I've set that up, it's just a holder, a data dictionary holder. And now I'm going to say for each player in win, right, it's going to say win, it's going to reference this object, and it's going to say player 0, because in that case, the position 0 is the player name, okay? And now it's going to add 1, 2, 1. So it's a counter. Basically, it's counting, right? So it looks through the first one, and then it counts each one. Now, there are different ways to count, and believe it or not, it's done at that point. And now my default dictionary, right? So it's a data dictionary, now has 2 entries. Cool. One for each player for how many times they won. And so now what I'm going to do is actually I'm preparing the output to the user. Now I could have put this code maybe somewhere else to isolate my inputs and outputs. But now I said current, right? So that prints that out. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over it one more time. This time though, I'm going to go over it by looking at, let's just kind of, I'm going to sort this win leaders. Okay. I'm going to sort in this. We've seen this dot item. So it looks at each one. And what this says is for each, the key, looking at the value, the key and values in sorted, because we're going to sort this thing, right? And it's going to look at this idea of the item, which in this case would be the number, right? How many times that they won or lost. And all this is doing is sorting it. So then it does a reverse, which is true, which gives me my leaderboard concept. And again, I only have to go, this also iterates over. Okay, cool. Now, look at what happened here, right? So in this case, and it's already popped back. So we'll go back up here and look real quick, right? So this iterates over my win leader, which is probably not the best name, right? But it does this and it sorts it based on the first item, with not the 0, which would be the player, but the, if you look at it, you can see the structure. Where is it at? Right here. Actually, we're already modifying it here, but you can see it up here. And because we're already past, sometimes you have to dig into it over here and look at it. But that's what it's doing, right? So it's sorting through what I already had. It's sorting it in reverse order, which gives me my highest numbers because of the default way it's ascending, and I did it descending, which is the reverse true. And then it outputs my leaderboard here. Okay, so that's the part that took me a little while to kind of wrap my head around. I'm going to go ahead and stop there. But I thought you might find it helpful because that's how I'm meeting the requirements of, you know, once I've stored it, the data. Okay, and again, we could go back here and look at the date, right? Here's my file. So what it does is it reads all the items out of the text file into memory. It does a sort to sort them by win. And then it does, a filter. It filters by win, which gives me a new data structure. And then I take that new data structure here and I sort it, right? That's how I end up doing the steps to get from the reading the data, putting the data into a through a filter to give me all the wins, setting up a default dictionary, then reading through each player to add up the number of times they're in there. Okay. And then I go one more time over it. In this case, it's a much smaller list because it only shows how many occurrences. And then here, I'm actually doing a sort so that I can see the leaderboard generally always shows the person who wins the most. Now, after I've done this, I can start thinking about actually other ways I could do this, because maybe what I want to do is actually show, like, of the percentage, like of the number of games they played, how many they won. That might be another good way to do it, but at least this gave me a first round of it. So I hope this helps you. Please let me know in your reply if this helps you, if you have any other questions about why I did it that way. What I used new here as far as the requirement was this filter, and it's not that different than what we saw with sort. I think the only difference is just understanding what your criteria for what it's going to return, and the fact that this, you add the actual array into it. Now, what comes back, and I talked about this, is a list, is not a list. It's an object, and I wanted to convert it into a list so I could do that. So I could iterate over it. All right. Talk to you later. Bye.